The Swiss franc, a currency so powerful it broke the traders betting against it. While every safe haven currency in the world was cracking under pressure, one tiny landlocked country in the middle of Europe did something nobody expected. It did the opposite. And not only did it survive, it became the most talked about, most studied, most controversial monetary story of the 21st century, the Swiss franc. A currency so safe that governments, billionaires, and ordinary families with life savings all wanted a piece of it at the same time. And that desperation, that flooding tidal wave of money rushing into Switzerland, almost destroyed the country it was meant to protect. This is the story of how a nation with only 8 million people went head-to-head with the entire global financial system, played one of the most expensive poker hands in central banking history, then folded the table and caused what traders now call the biggest flash crash in Forex history. And it gets stranger and messier the deeper you go. To understand what happened, you need to go back to 2010 and 2011 when Europe was coming apart at the seams. Greece was drowning in debt. Portugal and Ireland were right behind it. Spain and Italy were looking over their shoulders, wondering if they were next. The euro, this grand project that was supposed to unify the continent under one stable currency, was looking less like a masterpiece and more like a badly written disaster script. And when people get scared of one currency, they run to another. The problem was, where do you run? The US dollar had its own scars from 2008. The British pound had its issues. The Japanese yen had been dealing with decades of stagnation, but Switzerland, quiet, neutral, politically stable, financially disciplined Switzerland, had this little currency that had been a rock for over a century. So global money started flooding in. Not a trickle. A flood. Even economists were nervous, which, if you know economists, is a sign that something is genuinely, seriously wrong, because usually they're just confused, not scared. Here's the version of events that most people tell. In August of 2011, the euro briefly touched a record low against the Swiss franc. 1 euro bought only about 1 franc and half a centime, near parity. And the Swiss National Bank, the SNB, looked at their exporters, the watchmakers, the pharmaceutical companies, the precision manufacturers, and they panicked. A currency that expensive would make Swiss goods too costly to sell in Europe. Jobs would disappear. Companies would move overseas. So on the 6th of September 2011, under SNB Chairman Philip Hildebrand, the central bank made a dramatic announcement. They set a floor, a minimum exchange rate. 1 euro would always buy at least 1.20 Swiss francs, no matter what. The SNB said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that they would defend this rate with unlimited force. Unlimited. The official explanation was economic self-defense. Protect the exporters, stabilize the economy, bring some predictability back to Swiss business. The market believed them. Within minutes of the announcement, the franc dropped sharply. The policy held, and for 3 years and 4 months it worked. But that is only the version they want you to remember, because here is the part that nobody puts in the first paragraph of the news article. When the SNB said they would defend the 1.20 floor with unlimited intervention, they meant it literally. And literally is where the story gets uncomfortable. To keep the franc from rising above that ceiling, the SNB had to buy euros, constantly. They would print Swiss francs, sell those francs on the open market, and use that money to buy euros and other foreign currencies. Every time investors tried to push the franc higher, the SNB would step in and push it back down. This sounds manageable, until you see the numbers. In August 2011, before the peg, Switzerland's foreign currency reserves sat at around 255 billion Swiss francs. By December 2014, after 3 years of defending the floor, those reserves had ballooned to 510 billion francs. They had doubled. More than doubled, actually. Here's the part that should make your stomach drop. That 510 billion figure was equivalent to roughly 78% of Switzerland's entire annual GDP. The central bank of a country was holding foreign assets worth nearly the entire output of its economy, just to keep one exchange rate in place. Think about what that means. The SNB had accumulated an ocean of euros and European government bonds right at the time when Europe was in crisis. The very assets they were stockpiling were the ones most at risk of losing value. It is like someone who is terrified of a house fire, deciding to store their emergency savings inside the house in a pile of dry wood next to the fireplace. This was not an accident. It was the unavoidable, predictable cost of trying to artificially cap a currency in the face of enormous global capital flows. And everyone inside the SNB knew it. Every quarter, the bill got bigger. Every quarter, the risk got higher. And every quarter, they went back to the market and did it again. The franc had become so desirable that in 2011, short-term Swiss interest rates went negative for the first time, meaning investors were literally paying Switzerland for the privilege of keeping their money there. The SNB was essentially running one of the world's most expensive monetary illusions, and they couldn't tell anyone how long it would last. But the craziest part of this story is still coming. Because something happened in late 2014 that turned an expensive policy into an impossible one. In late 2014, the European Central Bank started signaling something enormous. They were going to launch their own quantitative easing program, essentially printing huge amounts of euros and injecting them into the European financial system. This would push the euro's value down further, and a weaker euro meant the SNB would have to work even harder, print even more francs, and accumulate even more euros just to hold that 1.20 floor. The math was becoming brutal. Meanwhile, in the foreign exchange markets, traders had spotted what they thought was a free lunch. The SNB had drawn a line in the sand. They had promised publicly, repeatedly, loudly, so that the franc would never rise above 1.20 per euro. So traders started betting on that stability. By the end of 2014, the ratio of long positions to short positions on the euro-franc pair had reached 70 to 1. 70 to 1. Almost every major speculative position in that currency pair was betting that the peg would hold. The confidence was extraordinary. The danger was invisible. Until it wasn't. Back inside the SNB, there was a growing problem that had nothing to do with currency traders. Because the bank is not entirely government-owned. 45% of its shares are held by private investors. The remaining portion belongs to the Swiss cantons, the regional governments. These cantons had been receiving cash transfers from the SNB for years. But as the losses on their euro-denominated assets mounted, those transfers were at risk. Political pressure was building. There was also another voice growing louder, the United States. Washington had been watching the SNB's currency operations carefully, and by late 2014, American officials were beginning to make noise about placing Switzerland on the U.S. Treasury's currency manipulator watch list, a designation that carries serious trade and diplomatic consequences. The SNB was caught between bad options and worse ones, a slower depreciation of the euro, a deeper pile of foreign reserves, a growing balance sheet that one economist described as a potential financial stability concern, and a commitment to the world that they would hold the line, a commitment they made just 3 days before they broke it. The peg was introduced under Philip Hildebrand, but it would be his successor, Thomas Jordan, who would have to kill it. On January 12, 2015, the SNB publicly reaffirmed that the currency floor was still in place, still solid. Nothing to worry about. 3 days later, they blew it up. January 15, 2015. The morning starts normally. Traders in Zurich, London, New York, Tokyo, all of them sitting at their screens watching the euro-franc pair sitting calmly right where it always sat. Right above 1.20, at 4:30 in the morning Eastern Time, the Swiss National Bank released a statement. They were abandoning the peg immediately, without transition, without warning. And if money could scream, this was the moment it would have lost its voice. Within 60 seconds of that announcement, liquidity in the euro-franc market essentially vanished. One of the largest Forex brokers at the time, FXCM, reported that virtually all liquidity was withdrawn by major providers within 1 minute of the news hitting. Within 5 minutes, the spread between buy and sell quotes had blown out to over 5,000 pips. Normally, you're talking about fractions of a pip. They were now 5,000 apart. The franc appreciated by more than 30% against the euro within minutes, 30%. In currency markets, a move of 1% in a day is significant. 2% is rare. 30% in minutes is not a market event, it's a market explosion. Traders who had leveraged positions betting on the peg's stability were wiped out. Many ended up with not just zero in their accounts, but negative balances. They owed money to their brokers on top of losing everything they had. Alpari UK, one of the most established retail Forex brokers in the world, declared insolvency that same day. FXCM, another huge name, reported losses of $225 million and watched its stock price collapse by nearly 90%. Smaller brokers across New Zealand, the UK, and Europe simply closed their doors and never reopened. The Swiss stock market fell 14% on the same day. Traders called it Francogeddon, the single largest flash crash in the history of the foreign exchange market. And the SNB, the people who caused it, said nothing further. They had made their decision. The illusion was over. But here's the detail that almost never makes the headlines, the part of this story that didn't just affect hedge funds and Forex traders. Thousands of miles away from Zurich, in Poland, in Hungary, and Croatia, ordinary people woke up on the morning of January 15, 2015, and discovered that their mortgage had just gotten 30% bigger. In the years before the crisis, when Swiss interest rates were low and the franc seemed stable, banks across Eastern Europe had offered home loans denominated in Swiss francs. The logic was simple. Swiss rates were lower than local rates, so the monthly payments were smaller. In Poland alone, over 700,000 households held franc-denominated mortgages. Hundreds of thousands more families across the region had taken out CHF mortgages to buy homes, to start businesses, to build lives. When Francogeddon hit, every single one of those loans rebalanced to the new exchange rate. In Greece, where there were already significant CHF-denominated loans, regulators immediately warned that the shock could worsen what were already dangerously fragile banks. The non-performing loans problem that had been slowly improving was suddenly at risk of exploding again. And Switzerland itself? The story there is more complicated than most people tell. The immediate aftermath was brutal. Swiss exports became dramatically more expensive overnight. Tourism collapsed. Watchmakers, machinery companies, and pharmaceutical exporters were looking at a 30% overnight price increase for all of their products sold in euros. The Swatch Group alone saw its stock fall 15% on that single day. But then something interesting happened. The Swiss economy didn't collapse. Part of that was because Switzerland had also cut its key interest rate deeper into negative territory, from minus 0.25% to minus 0.75%. Negative interest rates, meaning that commercial banks parking money at the SNB had to pay a fee for the privilege. This was meant to discourage capital inflows, to make holding francs slightly less attractive. It worked, partially. The franc did stabilize after its initial spike, and Swiss exporters, extraordinarily efficient and innovative, adapted. They found ways to cut costs, renegotiate supplier contracts, and in some cases, shift invoicing currencies. Switzerland's manufacturing sector is built on high-margin, high-precision products, where price is not the only variable. Rolex watches, Novartis Pharmaceuticals, Roche Diagnostics. These are not the kinds of products that buyers swap for cheaper alternatives just because the exchange rate moved. What the Swiss franc story revealed, and what makes it still relevant today, is the fundamental paradox at the heart of safe haven currencies. The safer a currency is perceived to be, the more people want it in a crisis. The more people want it, the more it appreciates. The more it appreciates, the more it hurts the economy it is supposed to protect. And the more it hurts, the more pressure mounts on policymakers to do something dramatic. Switzerland tried to fight that paradox for 3 years. They spent hundreds of billions of francs trying to outsmart the collective behavior of global capital. They printed money, bought foreign bonds, took enormous balance sheet risks, and told the world every single week that the peg was permanent, right up until the day they ended it. The SNB's balance sheet today is still one of the largest in the world relative to GDP. The foreign reserves that were built up during those 3 years of intervention have never fully unwound. Switzerland became, almost accidentally, one of the world's biggest sovereign wealth funds, holding billions in Apple, Nvidia, and other global equities as a side effect of its currency policy. By the third quarter of 2024, the SNB reported profits of 6.55 billion francs in that quarter alone, partly from its gold holdings and equity positions. The currency manipulator designation from the United States, the political pressure at home, the near destruction of the retail Forex industry, the mortgage crisis in Eastern Europe, all of it traces back to one small country trying to control something that fundamentally cannot be controlled: the global desire for safety in uncertain times. Here is what the Swiss franc story really teaches us. It is not a story about monetary policy. It is not a story about interest rates or reserve ratios or exchange rate mechanisms. At its core, it is a story about fear. Global, collective, irrational, entirely human fear. When the world gets scared, people do not ask about fundamentals. They do not run spreadsheets. They run toward whatever feels solid, whatever feels reliable, whatever feels like it has stood the test of time. And for over 100 years, Switzerland had built that reputation through its neutrality, its banking systems, its political stability, its low inflation, its secretive, reliable, almost mythological financial institutions. The franc became a symbol, and when a currency becomes a symbol, it stops behaving like a currency. It behaves like gold. It behaves like a prayer. And praying at something with 5-10 billion francs of other people's money eventually has consequences. What Switzerland did was neither heroic nor foolish. It was the only thing a small trade-dependent nation could do when the rest of the world decided it was the only safe port in a storm. They fought back. They spent an enormous amount trying to hold back the tide. And when holding back the tide became impossible, they stepped aside, creating one of the most chaotic single mornings in financial market history in the process. Finance is not logic dressed in numbers. It is psychology dressed in a suit. The Swiss franc crisis is proof that even the most stable, most trusted, most carefully managed monetary system in the world can be overwhelmed by collective human emotion. If you found this video valuable, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach people who love financial history as much as you do. And subscribe if you want more videos like this. Click the next video for another insightful narrative. Thanks for watching.